All right, so we are going to be doing today probate training 101. So I guess I want to start off. You guys all understand what probate is? So, probate is basically when a property is owned and the person passes away and they didn't put it into a trust. It was titled in their name. In order for that property to be properly transferred, you have to go through probate, which is the legal process of transferring that property to the heirs. So probate deals for us, those are your biggest deals that you will have in the company. And what Josh and I always say, the further they're removed from the asset, the bigger the deal it's going to be. Okay. So basically, probate, the biggest rule is that probate goes up and down. So what that means is people that are first entitled to inherit, you always go down the chain, meaning if it's a woman, Jane Doe, and she's not married, then the people that would be entitled to inherit first are her children. And then if she didn't have any children, the people that would be entitled to inherit second are her parents. So you first go down the chain to her kids, and if there's no kids, then you go up the chain, and that's to her parents. Now, if her parents are deceased as well, then you go left and right, meaning that you're going to go to her brothers and sisters, right? So it's always first kids, second parents, third brothers and sisters, and then if her brothers and sisters are dead, now you go back down. So now you're going down to her brothers and sisters' kids, which would be her nieces and nephews, right? So by that point, you're generally always going to find someone who's going to be able to inherit. But that's the simple probate, right? So that's where there's one person on title, Jane Doe. She wasn't married. Now, then the next thing you have to look at is, all right, well, what if Jane Doe was married to John Doe? Okay. That's where it starts getting much more complicated because you have to start asking the questions. And the first questions are, do they have any kids? Because you always want to go first, you go down, right? But there's a caveat. And the caveat is did they have any kids outside of that marriage? All right. And that's where it kind of gets complicated because now you've got to take into consideration those kids or not. So first we'll look at if Jane Doe was married to John Doe and they had no kids outside their marriage. So that's going to be one of your first questions. Hey, were you married? Oh, okay. You were married. Okay. Is your husband still alive? Oh, who died first? Your husband passed away. Did your husband have any kids outside of your guys' marriage? Awkward question, but we have to know. And she says no. Okay, then you're good. Because what that means is if Jane Doe and John Doe are on title to the property and neither one of them had kids outside the marriage, then the surviving spouse inherits. All right. Now, if they had kids outside the marriage, then that's when it becomes even more questions you have to ask. So now is this a homestead property? Right? If it's a homestead property, then now Jane Doe's husband, John Doe, passed away. John Doe had kids outside the marriage. It's homestead. So now Jane Doe only gets a life estate, meaning that she gets to inherit the property for the remainder of her life. And John Doe's children are the beneficiaries, the remainder, what's called the remainder interest. So in that particular situation, you have to get, she can sell it, but she has to get those kids involved as well. Now, to add even an additional wrinkle is you can do what's called an elective share. So let's say Jane Doe chooses to say, I don't want my life estate. Now I want to be owners 50-50 with the kids. So she can do that. She can say, I want 50% ownership of the property, and then the kids also share 50% ownership. For us, because we're in the process of acquiring the property, we don't really care of how they're doing it. that's more of life, estate planning and stuff like that. Because no matter what, we're going to have to get mom and the children signed up. Doesn't matter if she chooses to do an elective or not. It doesn't matter. All it can do is it can prevent the kids necessarily from selling the property until their stepmom passes away. Okay. So does that make sense? I mean, that's where it becomes really, really complicated. I'm giving you like the high level of, but these are the questions you have to ask. It's always going to be, all right, I'm talking to a relative and Jane Doe is on title. So first question you ask, A, was Jane Doe married? Okay. Jane Doe was not married, right? So I'm talking to the kids. I know that the kids are entitled to it. But then if I say, all right, well, I'm talking to the kids and was Jane Doe's on title, was Jane Doe married? Yes. Okay. Now I have to look at, all right, well, who died first? Did Jane Doe or John Doe die? Did husband or wife die first? Because that's an important question. Remember, their interest, if they were married at the time of the death, passes to whoever was remaining. So if Jane Doe dies before John Doe, then whatever interest Jane Doe had goes to John Doe. That's kind of the importance. So if you're talking to the kid, and then it becomes, all right, well, am I talking to the kid of both Jane Doe and John Doe? Or am I talking to the kid of just Jane Doe? Am I talking to the kid of just John Doe? I'm using the names, but that's kind of the questions you have to ask. So we can run through, let's run through Diego's deal that he picked up yesterday. So this obviously was a live situation. And I guess, Diego, you can kind of, what do you know about the heirs? Who are the heirs? And then how did you arrive? I mean, let's figure that out.
So reaching out to the person, first of all, we showed up like she was still alive.
Okay.
Realistically, she wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to reach out to the brother, the siblings, IDI, and he's the one that informed me on what happened. He mentioned that the person had 3 kids and one of them was not really her kid.
Mm-hmm.
So long story short, I had to reach out to an individual kid for me to get their information because they didn't really have each other's information. So once I was able to do that, then I was able to come to the conclusion of what they wanted to do in regards to state amongst property, and one of the kids didn't want anything to do with the mom. So it's just a bit complicated in regards to that.
So when you were doing this, I mean, I guess this is how I always look at this lead. So this lead was titled in the mother's name, correct? And that's what we have in our system. So we have it titled as LaShonda Lovett. Now, one of the things that Anthony and we just kind of do naturally is, and I know Josh does it, is I always will, as soon as I heard that person was deceased, the first thing I'm doing is I'm looking for their obituary. All right. So on this particular lead, I'm assuming you looked for the obituary, and were you able to find one or no?
The brother was able to find me.
Okay. So when you Googled, you weren't able to find the obituary, but you were able to find, because you contacted an heir, a brother, who actually wasn't entitled to it.
I just keep going.
Yeah. So you talked to the brother, but in that discussion, you determined that obviously the brother was not entitled because LaShonda still had children. All right. Now, one of the things that was key in this that I wish I'd have been a little more involved in is, you said it here, there was a third kid, but you weren't sure if that kid was related to this estate or not. Because everyone was saying that this wasn't really her kid. She raised this kid, right? So that's an important thing to always remember, because if they're not related, doesn't matter if they raised this person from 6 months. If they never actually adopted the child, then that child is not entitled to anything. Okay. So in this particular case, you really have two heirs, not three. Even though they may have grown up together, they were living under the same roof. If that child was not formally adopted, and that's something we checked and we verified, then there's actually only two heirs. So there's only two heirs that we need to deal with in this particular case. And then I'm sure when you were talking to her brother, one of the questions I'm sure you asked was whether or not LaShonda was married. I'm sure when you spoke with the siblings or her children, you asked that question as well. And that's information, like if they don't have that information, you don't fret about it, because once we order the death certificate, it's going to be on the death certificate. Okay. And that's going to be, the marital status. It's super important, because, and we've had deals where, let's say the person, dies and the city's the one that finds the person, right? They die in the house, there's no one there, the city finds the person, and on the death certificate it says unknown, 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 everything. Then we have to go through the whole arduous process of actually amending that death certificate, because we cannot probate that death certificate until we actually can substantiate whether or not that person was married, because that is a key thing. If they're married, obviously their spouse is entitled to inherit, and we have to know that, and the judges have to know that. So on this particular one, you went through that process, you asked the questions. Yeah.
What's the significance of $70,000?
$75,000.
$75,000.
Okay. So
you guys know?
One of the Yes. So essentially, there's two different types of probate. There's what's called summary administration, and then there's formal administration. Okay. Our goal is we always want to do summary administration. The reason why, summary administration is much quicker. Okay. Summary administration essentially means that the assets pass to the heirs by operation of law without having a personal representative appointed. The reason why we want to do that is because the asset will just merely pass to that person, and that person can then deed the property without going through a formal administration process, without petitioning the court to authorize the sale of the asset, without having to do accounting, inventory, and all these additional things that are done in formal administration. So our goal is we always want to do summary administration. Now, the significance of being able to do summary administration is you have two things. If the estate is less than $75,000, the value, and the value is based on property appraised value, then it's summary. Or if the person died more than 2 years ago. Okay? But then, like every other thing, there's a caveat. If the property was homestead, and that's the only asset, then the estate is valued at under $75,000 because that asset is exempt. Meaning that it's your homestead asset. So even if the property was valued at $1 million, but they only had a homestead, they had a homestead on that asset, then it would be $0 for the value of the estate. So you could still do summary. Okay, so it's really important to know. But that's why you'll see in your probate documents where we'll have an additional document, what's called the petition to determine homestead, is because we're squeezing that estate into a summary administration. Although it doesn't technically qualify for summary administration, we're doing it under the exemption status.
In other words, if the property is homestead, regardless of the value of the property, it will be a summary.
Correct. Right. So that's extremely important. We always, and one way to check that, so like let's go back to Diego's deal. So if we go to, are you on property appraiser there? All right. So one way that you check is you're going to look here at the homestead. So your homestead is either going to be at $25,000 or $50,000 exemption. If you're married, it's $50,000. If you're not married, it's $25,000. But by seeing the exemption here, you have to look at the exemption for the last tax year, or the tax year of when the person died. So let's say, for instance, the person died in 2019. We need to be looking at the tax stat. Well, we'll say 2021 because that's pulled up. We need to look at whether or not the property was homesteaded in 2021. We don't care if the property was homesteaded in 2024. It's got to be when she passed. And technically what should happen, but the counties screw up on this a lot, is when the person passes away, obviously the homestead exemption should go away because the property is no longer homestead. And if it doesn't go away, then you can actually sometimes get what's called a homestead tax penalty, because if the heirs don't notify them that the person passed away and they were still giving them the benefit of a tax break for the homestead, then they're going to say, oh, we need to recorrect for those 3 years that they passed away in 2021 for the taxes that we were assessing on the property. And then we're going to charge you an additional 15% penalty on it because you didn't notify me. Now, it's bullshit, but that's what happens. But so this one, when you're going through your analysis of the property, and this is like why having tabs and windows is so important and up, and having the 2 monitors, because when you're talking to this person and I'm doing a probate deal, the first thing I'm doing is I'm not only looking at Salesforce and I'm looking at our system, but I'm also looking at the property appraiser, because that's going to give me some additional information. I want to know immediately whether or not this is homestead. That's one of the first things I want to know, because I want to know how long it's going to take me to get this deal done. And I want to know what I can actually offer this person realistically, because whether or not the property is homestead is going to make a big difference, right? If the property is homestead and they're telling me they had a bunch of credit cards and stuff like that and they died within 2 years, I don't really care. I don't care about all those debts because the property was homestead, right? I know I'm not going to have to pay those. But that's something when I'm talking to them, I can tell them, hey, look, this person, your mother passed away. Did she have any outstanding medical bills? Stuff like that. Oh, she may have had, she was in the hospital, or you say, oh, did she stay in the hospital before she passed away? Was she in hospice care? How did they die? You want to find all that information. Then you can kind of get an idea. Did she have insurance? Was she on Medicaid? You're asking these questions because you want to preemptively know whether or not there's going to be any sort of creditors that are going to be made to the estate, right? As best as you can. And if there are going to be creditors, and let's say she didn't have any insurance, she was in the hospital for 3 months, I know that she's going to have medical bills up the wazoo, and the property's not homestead, it's not a deal. Not a deal, because those creditors are going to make claims. They're going to be entitled to the property because it wasn't homestead, and I can't do anything. But if she starts telling you, oh yeah, she was, in the hospital for 3 months, but you go in here and you look, okay, yeah, the property was homestead, I don't care.
So it's that important to know.
That's why the more you know, you want to, again, your job is to be the expert in the room. So you have to ask all these questions. You want to pull the information out of the person, right? You're already talking to them. They've already engaged with you. And sometimes it's a sensitive situation. Maybe if they died within the past year and they're still grieving, obviously, again, you can tell by tonalities on the phone how sensitive this is to the person. If they were close to their mom and whatnot, then obviously you want to handle them with kid gloves. You don't want to be peppering them with all these questions, but you want to rephrase, oh, I'm so sorry about your loss. I hope, was your mom in the hospital for a while before she passed away? Were you able to be there? These are the kind of things you want to kind of be a little bit more tactful in how you ask that question, but you still need to find out that information. For me, again, you're coming off as the person who's conducting the sale. For me, as I come off as the attorney, I can just be point blank, because I can just tell them, legally, I need to know this information. I know this is very tough, but legally, we have to be able to prepare the documents accordingly, and I'll get the same answer with a lot less emotion. But that's just because of the direction and the position that I'm coming from, and vice versa. You're usually that first phone call, so you're trying to get as much information as you can. So you have to be a little more careful, I guess, with how you position, your questions that you're asking. And you just have to know, like, kind of what sensitivities. I mean, I don't know. What were they like? Were they caring about their mom on that particular deal? Or they're like,
First of all, I had no idea that the mom
passed away. Yeah.
And then when I'm asking for her, the brother was like, I'm sorry, she passed away last year. I was like,
Yeah.
What's that mean? That's what last year.
Within 2 years, so you have to make sure it's not homestead.
Yeah. So and so that one was homestead. So then you'll see, I think, when Yelisa prepared the documents, that's why when we're doing the legal referral form, that information it's important, because the legal referral is telling the legal team what documents need to be prepared, right? That's why we can always redo documents, but it's better if we can get them done right the first time. So that's asking these questions is super important. So, I mean, that really is kind of the high level of probate. What we can do, so I'll ask some questions. We'll play some trivia here. So let's say you've got.
I actually have a lead that we can pull up.
Okay.
That we can look at. William Shepard.
William Shepard.
Just Google Shepard. I think it's Arthur Shepard. This lead would sit in our system, and I can tell you right now that this will be. If you get the family on board, it will be $100,000. Okay. This is a pre-tax deed lead. You know what the benefit of this lead is nobody is competing with us, right? So, he died in 2015, according to my records. If you look at my notes, you'll see as well. All right. There's the children.
All right. So yeah, let's take this lead. Let's go back there real quick, Anthony, because I want to see. Let's actually walk through the process of working this lead. So if I'm pulling up this lead in our system, the first thing that I see that it has an EST here, meaning it's an estate. All right. So what's the first thing that you guys would do from this lead? All right. So you're going to go to property appraiser. You're going to click on the deed. All right.
But it doesn't say anything about spouse.
Okay. So if it says Arthur and Geraldine Shepard, all right, and so this is actually a great training tool, right? So the deed went to Arthur and Geraldine Shepard, but what does property appraiser say? Go back to property appraiser. Property appraiser only and has
State and.
Okay. Why does it say that? Because we don't know, and property appraiser doesn't know if they were married or not. They didn't have husband and wife on the deed. It could be brother and sister. We don't know. So then what would be the next thing you would do to determine whether or not they were married or husband and wife or brother and sister?
Public record. Looking for marriage.
IDI.
Got Google. That's the second thing I'm doing. I'm going to Google their names. I'm going to put Jupiter, Florida, obituary. You're going to put.
She dies first. I'll tell you that.
So I'm going to put obituary, Jupiter, Florida.
Yeah.
And there you go. That's the first one. If you click on the first one.
And I want you guys to notice something. What we have in Salesforce and what we have in the obituary, what doesn't match? Go to Salesforce real quick. Go down. All right, what do we got there? I got Latasha, I got Tamika, and I got Latoya. It sounds like a little rap song. All right. Now, what's the obituary show?
Latoya. Tamika.
I got two. I got a third.
Vanessa.
See, we didn't know Vanessa.
Okay. But this is even before we even get there. Like, that's why we're walking through this. The first thing that we did was we went to the deed. And you notice, again, Salesforce only had Arthur. We go to property appraiser, it had Arthur and Geraldine, right? We look at the deed, we don't have a marital status. So what did we do? Instead of going to IDI, doing all this other stuff, you do the basic thing and you Google. This gives you all the information. Now, what did this just tell us as well? I mean, it's key. Who died first?
She did.
She died first. She's survived by her loving husband. Okay? Now, what does that also tell you? That tells you that she was married at the time of the death. And so, Geraldine, now we need to find out. I would go back to property appraiser. I'm going to look to see whether or not this property is homestead. All right. When did the exemption stop? 2021. All right. So we know that when Geraldine died, the property was homestead. That was in 2015, right? So what does that mean? This is a great strategy here. We pulled up Geraldine. Geraldine died first. Geraldine had 4 kids. Arthur survived. Now, if we were to do this deal when Arthur was still alive, Arthur would have inherited everything, not the kids, because all the kids were their kids. Now we've done his obituary. Now, when did he die? 2021. When the exemption stopped, right? So we know the property was homestead when he died. What's Arthur's obituary say?
Those are the obituaries I get. A whole lot of nothing. No, it's gonna be the same one. All of them.
That's not what you're gonna have.
That's not him. All right, go back to there. There was one more. Yeah, that one was.
Those are the ones that I remember too.
Okay. Well, what we know is we know that there was 4 kids in Geraldine's obituary. We know that Arthur was married to Geraldine, and by doing the Google search on Geraldine, we know what kids there were. And there weren't just 3 kids, there were 4 kids, right? So now you know that the people that you're dealing with are the 2 people that were on title are deceased. We know who's entitled to inherit this are those 4 kids. So then the next thing what would be the next thing that you would do? Find the 4 kids.
All right, I got another one for you guys. Let's say I had all 4 kids there. Vanessa Hatch would be the 4th kid, right? Latasha lives in West Palm Beach. Okay. Oh, Tamika's the last one on target.
Because she doesn't want to sell the house.
She's living in the house for free.
Yeah.
Right? She doesn't want her siblings bringing this up either. So I'm focusing on talking to Latasha, Tamika, or Latasha, Latoya, or Vanessa. Because they're getting nothing out of this.
Correct.
Right? Tamika doesn't ever want to sell this house.
Yeah, she's getting a free ride.
Free. Right? So, meanwhile, you call Vanessa, you call Latoya, you call Latasha, and you can bring that knowledge of probate to them. And you can also say, you can spin it 2 ways. I see that the taxes are a lot more than they used to be now, too. Right? Or let's say the county doesn't catch it. Richard and I have had ones in Miami where Dade County hasn't caught it in 10 years. And then they catch it, and the next thing you know, they own an extra $100,000.
Yeah.
You can't negotiate that.
Yep.
Right? Hey, they haven't caught it yet, but you're probably going to want to sell this immediately because you should be getting 6 years of homestead exemption fines.
There's a way to
Yeah.
trick them a little bit.
So on this lead, we've done all this research. You've pulled up the names on IDI. You're trying to make contact, and you don't make any contact, right? What would be the next thing that you would do?
Call again after hours or a different hour of the day. Swing again.
There's one more thing that I would do. All right. first thing that obviously I pulled these people up on IDI. I didn't do anything. I'm going to go look at the clerk of court, and I'm going to see if they ever actually even open a probate case. So I'm going to go to, this is Palm Beach County. I'm going to go to my Palm Beach clerk. And likely they haven't. Okay.
My dad died probably.
So let's look. Who are the people that signed joiners here?
Arthur, Latasha, Latoya.
Arthur.
He did it the year he died.
And then Latasha, Latoya, Tamika, Vanessa. Right? Then Tamika, who's now exactly? Who took over the case? Tamika.
That's who you want to talk to the most.
That's your decision maker.
Who's
Right?
living in the house, Vanessa, right? Who's living in the house?
I think Vanessa.
So that's one person, right? This is kind of when you would get me involved, and I'll tell you the reason why you'd get me involved is because we can click here. If you click on party names, all right, those are your Geraldine Spring. All right, that's who I'm calling. The reason why I'm calling that, because if we go back to the docket, we'll go down. First, the case was dismissed. Then Tamika took over. Click to the next page. And there was an order for summary administration. Now, I can tell you, no offense to this attorney, but the reason why property appraiser is not updated is because she's a moron. Why is she a moron? Who died first? Geraldine. Who are we doing a probate of? Geraldine. So she did the wrong person. It needs to be Arthur. She reopened the case of the wrong person. So now let's go look. Let's see if Arthur a probate was done. Here we go. Same people. Same attorney.
That's the last person on page 2.
No, it's fine. And then I wanted to see. All right, so they filed their statement of claim. All right, so as of January of last year, we have an order of summary administration done. The asset probably should be transferred. But who was the head person on this particular one? Latoya. And then Tamika.
Latoya was the petition.
Okay. So what I'm going to say is kind of interesting here is I don't think the kids were all the same kids of Geraldine and Arthur. All right. What it looks like is Arthur was the father of two of them, Tamika and Latoya, but not Vanessa and who. Well, she was.
the father of Latoya.
He was the father of Latoya and Tamika, but who was the other one? Vanessa.
And Tamika Hatcher. Both of those are Hatchers.
Okay. So
We have 2 shepherds and 2 Hatchers.
now you know. Super important to know. So now you know there's a family divide. There's a family divide. So Geraldine, these were all of her kids, but not all of Arthur's kids. Right? So generally what happens is there's a family divide. Right? So you're able to kind of pit the families against because 2 of them are blood, and two of them are not, right? But you have to get them all on board, right? So that's a very, right there to me is you have two people, right? You had one person who was the lead who was closer to the mother, and then you had one person who was closer to the father. Those are the two people that you have to contact because those are going to be the decision makers. So that's how I would work that lead. So I think that's one of the things that we have to be more cognizant is taking a look at the docket and searching for that information. Now, I mean, what I would tell you, like if you looked at that and say, hey, Richard, look at this lead, I'm obviously calling, this is the family attorney because the family attorney did both, right? So I'll call this Geraldine, who knows, I've never heard of her, but I'll call her. But you also know the 2 point of contacts for this lead, and you can figure out, all right, well, they did do probate, so they're not complete indigenous people. I think they did file, if you go back to that docket, Anthony, they did apply for an indigency. What does that mean? They didn't have the money to pay for the cost of the probate.
How much does a probate cost between 7 to
$285.
Oh,
So they did not have $285 to do between the four of them to do the probate. What does that tell you? There you go.
15 grand for the taxes.
There you go.
And to be clear, too, that's to like open the probate in the clerk of courts. The cost of the probate will be attorney fees.
Yeah, I'm assuming that most likely this attorney, like I said, is a family friend and probably did it for free.
You told me, oh, if you want to do the probate, it will be this much.
Yeah, because at that point they wouldn't just be like filing it; they'd be hiring an attorney to do it.
Oh, okay. So between that and attorney and whatnot,
Yeah,
it could be between 7,000.
Once you just started, it's gonna be 285.
Yeah, that's the court fee. So all that information we were able to find out. I mean, we looked at this lead. I mean, we're doing this. We can do it in a couple minutes, but we just took the time to kind of really explain this lead. So you have so much information. It took us 10 minutes on this lead.
It takes time to speed up.
Right? But what I'm showing you is this, you can gain so much information. We just created the whole entire narrative for this particular lead.
Yeah.
Right? So now you know who the decision makers are, who the attorney is. They don't have the money to pay for the cost of the probate. They're not going to probably have the money to pay for the taxes.
I have money to pay the attorney.
The attorney, I guarantee, was a family friend who did it for free.
Or legal aid.
I mean, she definitely doesn't work for legal aid. Yeah. So I guess that to me is how you work a state lead, right? You're taking the information that's provided, and yes, it takes a little bit more time to kind of dive in, but we haven't even made one phone call. We haven't even picked up the phone. We figured all that out ourselves. All right? And you're able to put together, like, you know what the family tree is. You actually know the whole entire dynamic. You know that this Arthur had these kids and Geraldine had these kids. You know that the kids are still alive, that none of the kids are deceased because as of 2023, they were all doing the probate together, signing joiners and whatnot. Now, the next step would be, all right, you call these numbers, right? You're not getting any, they're all disconnected. So the next thing that you do is you say, Richard, pull the dockets for me. Their addresses may be different than IDI. Or maybe IDI didn't give you, maybe you didn't get any information IDI. On the petitions and information, they have to put the addresses. And then I'm able to pull that information and I'll send it to you. Right? So again, all that is knowledge is power. You are now armed and loaded on this particular lead to go make a deal. You're going to know where they live. You're going to know all their information. You know their family. You can do a door knock. You can do whatever you want to get this deal. And the biggest thing is, you know they don't have the money because they literally just filed for indigency. All right?
Yeah, all right, I got another one. Let's look at this one. These are just like a couple deals I was looking at yesterday to sit out there. Let's look up Ronald Farrington. Farr. Yep. Let's look at call attempts on this.
Matter of fact, I'm gonna be calling him today. A task.
We got no
All right.
attempts on a call.
So, first thing that you do, what was it? Let's walk through it again, Anthony. You move too quick. This is training. All right. So let's go to the top of the lead. What's the first thing that we notice? EST. It's an estate.
That auction price is bothering as it looks like it's not homesteaded.
Okay. Well, I mean, where's the property at?
South Ocean. So
Palm Beach. So it very well could be it. But what I would do could be a year of taxes, right? So I don't know how much it's worth. So the second thing I'm going to do, like that was a good point. You look at the auction amount and it looks too high. I'm going to go to property appraiser. And what's the value?
0.7.
So those taxes seem pretty accurate. All right.
Or let's click on tax looker to make sure they're accurate.
How much is it per year?
You know, file 24,000 a year, roughly 23 the previous.
Okay.
Well, another thing I'm going to do,
Tax
guys.
bill 23.
Hold on, guys. Another thing that we're missing, what we're going to do is when we're looking at those taxes, right?
Why? No. What you guys just did is wrong. What you just did is completely wrong. No. What kind of lead is this?
Pre-tax deed.
Okay. What's a pre-tax deed?
Less than 2 years delinquent.
Okay.
Well, at least 1 year
No, but it's
between one more than one. Yeah, 1 to 2 years delinquent.
Okay.
2 years going on 3 is what I've seen.
Okay. So this is again. So there's this. When you're saying pre-tax deed, what does that mean? There's not a tax deed yet, right? I'm not going to update that information. The reason why is because whenever we're buying properties, right? Let's say there's 8 years of taxes owed. For a tax deed application, it's only applying for 3 years, right? So if let's say the taxes were $5,000 each year, it's $15,000. But let's say it's been 8 years, technically it's $40,000. The reason why I'm not updating that amount is because what's required to be paid to save the property? Not the $40,000, the 3 years. Right? I want to put that information somewhere else. But when we're looking, what are we paying? We're paying the 3 years. So I'm going to put on the notes, total tax amount is whatever, but I'm not looking, that property is not going to auction for $40,000. It's going to auction for $15,000. You can put the other amount in somewhere else. Yeah, you could put it in an additional like lien amount or whatever and then put the notes. But those two amounts are separate. That's information you want to know, but I'm not saying what, and the reason why I'm telling you this is because from our perspective, what's our out-of-pocket expense? It's not $40,000. Our out-of-pocket expense is $15,000. Okay? So that's how, again, this is why it's important to understand. Everyone, obviously, in your mindset, you're looking, yes, this is what's owed on a property, right? This is the debt. Correct. But what really is it to take for us to get it done? What would they have to go to the tax collector to truly pay it off to save the home? They don't have to come up with the full $40,000 today.
Stick to the property appraiser website. Yeah. All right, so we'll go back to the tax collector's office. Yeah. All right. So I'm looking at this. Now, hypothetically speaking, the last 2 years of taxes weren't paid, right? So kind of what it triggers in my head is this guy probably died in 2022. But let's just say I Google his name, no obituary comes up because his name is Joe Smith. okay? And I can't find anything. But I realized that Joe Smith has been paying the taxes for 10 years. And then the next year, Josh Blanchard paid the taxes. Well, Josh Blanchard is probably related to this guy somehow. So even if I can't find the obituary, I want to get in contact with him because he's affiliated with the property. He's just not randomly doing a charitable effort paying for property taxes, right?
Correct.
Unless he's waiting to do it for a certain amount of time.
Adverse possession.
He's got to be 7 years. Yeah.
Somebody
Boom.
tried to do that.
But here's what comes up.
Yeah.
Look who paid the taxes.
William Conrad.
Robert J. Frank, executive, I believe it says after
The
that.
estate of William Conrad. Now, what's the name of this lead?
Farrington, wrong.
So what you need to do? Go to property appraiser. And you want to look at your deed. William Strana, Robert Albert Farrington. And let's go back to that tax bill. And that's just interesting to me because wasn't William Strana who
sold the property?
sold him the property?
And then I guess Ronald died the following year after purchasing his new condo.
They bought it in 2006.
Yeah, he bought it in 2006. So was this an interfamily transfer?
Or is he holding a note on it?
I don't know. Yeah. So that's a person that I'd want to contact.
And then Cynthia Curtis comes up.
2022.
Kind of weird. Who the hell is Cynthia Curtis?
Yeah. So these are all people that I would be making notes of.
All right, so I can tell you right now, you look the obituary up, nothing comes up on this obituary. Couldn't find it.
Okay.
Okay.
So then what's the next thing that I would do? No obituary, no notes. Properties in Palm Beach. Going to the clerk.
Clerk of court.
All right.
That's still open.
And that case is still open. Now let's go here. The one thing that you can always do quickly, you look at the party names. We've got, that's the decedent. Our petitioner is Justin T. Bailey. Who is Justin T. Bailey? He's the personal rep. And let's scroll down. We also have a joinder and waiver consent by Robert J. Frank. And who's the other person? Cynthia Curtis. Those are the two people that pay the taxes. Right? We also have a will. And so then as soon as I see this lead, Richard, can you look at this? What am I going to do? I'm going to pull up, I'm going to get you their addresses because it's going to be in the petition. And I'm also going to just look to see what's going on. All right, so go to the second page. Let's see where we're at. All right. So again, so this is weird. The last thing that was done is over almost a year old. So obviously they're not moving forward with this probate. Something's going on. But Josh said he looked for the obituary. He couldn't find anyone. Well, we have an open case. Next thing you do, you ask me. I'll get you the addresses. You're going to have your contact information. Done.
All right. And yes, let's just say you do IDI this. Or you can IDI this.
At this point, I'm
All
gonna start
right.
making calls.
So, like, what gets me? Does this get me excited? Does this encourage me or discourage me when I IDI this lead? You gotta put Farrington in.
That's that one result, right? Isn't that it?
Yeah, but I want to do about the last thing.
I would have been searching the two people's names.
Correct.
The zip code of the address.
That's what I would do.
So the reason
So
the
when
reason
I
I do it by address is
Yeah.
because then I'll pull up an address, so then I get 4 results, and then here I can easily put I can start writing Cynthia, see if she pops up, and then what was the other name on there?
Frank, last name Frank.
Robert or Ronald.
Something like that.
Ronald there. Right?
Yeah. 4 results.
All right, guys. So let's just look at this name right here. He is somehow linked to this property, correct?
He was the former owner.
Where does he live?
West Virginia.
Okay. Doesn't probably have any skin in the game. Cynthia Joyce Curtis is somehow linked to this property. Where does she live?
Far, far away in
Do
Hawaii.
you think she wants to manage a property in Palm Beach?
No.
Do you think she gets any use out of it?
No, she lives in paradise already.
All right, but let's look. You say she lives in Paradise. Let me look to see her address. Honestly, it's in Hawaii, right? So you're going to assume it's a $5 million house. Let's look to see what she's living in. She lives in a 448 square foot house, guys.
She's not worried about it.
Right.
Palm Beach.
But she is not the 1 percentile. She lives in a 448 square foot house. Right? That she paid, you see if she bought it, she'll probably pay 400 grand for it. 600 grand. Like, and the other guy lives in West Virginia. Neither of them are living in the house. So are we gonna get better pricing on that deal? Yes. Who else is linked to this house?
We got Robert Franklin.
We know Robert Frank somehow is linked to this house. He sold him the house, probably related to him. I don't know. So who is the one person we gotta find?
Robert Frank.
No, who do we have to find? Who's the other person?
Robert Curtis. Go with that instead of Frank.
All right,
Justin
Robert
Bailey.
Curtis right there.
Justin Bailey. Wasn't there a Justin Bailey on the docket?
He's a petitioner.
But he's a personal representative. That's like calling an attorney that started your company.
Yeah.
Go to the party names. Yeah. So Justin Bailey, petitioner, decision maker. That's whenever you're looking at petitioner, that's who you should assume the decision maker.
Nobody else. Really
He's the one that's controlling the estate. And so you're not seeing Justin Bailey anywhere here, correct?
Not associated with that.
All right. So what do you do next? Ask me. So if I'm going to go pull this up, I can probably pull it up on my phone.
Because there is a will.
Let me see if I can pull this up real quick. For the purposes of training, no, but like when you say you have so much to learn, it's okay because you're going to get to this point, and then our job is like you get here, right? You're like, all right, Palm Beach, work. Wi-Fi is shit. Okay. Search court records. All right. What is it? How do you spell the last name?
Farrington.
Farrington. And then Ronald.
Okay.
All right. So here's the probate. And I'm going to look at the petition. All right. So Justin Bailey has an interest in the estate as the person elected by the majority. So we have Robert Frank, executor of the estate of William Conrad Struna. What's the relationship? The estate. Cynthia Curtis. Friend. These aren't even related. These are just people he chose to name. Where does Justin Bailey live? Naples. Go to IDI. His address is 561 2nd Street, Naples, Florida.
How old is he, guys?
39.
Okay?
How is he like even related? Not even related?
Not even related.
And it has something to do with the previous owner?
No. No, he's just what's appointed by the will. So now I'm going to look at the will. He says in the will, he bequeaths to Cynthia Curtis 50% of 2300 South Ocean Boulevard and William Strana 50%. What does Justin get out of this? Nothing. Does he want to be bothered with this? No. He's not getting anything. All right? He's our decision maker. He gets nothing. Do you really think he cares how much this sells for? There you go. So now you've got Justin's information. You know that William Strana passed away in New York, and Cynthia is hanging out in Hawaii. And all his job is complete this estate and give them a check. Does that sound like a deal to you?
She lives in Hawaii, guys. Right? So, Justin, I don't know if you know, but there's $46,000 in taxes due on this property. And if they're not paid, it's going to go for tax deed auction to get sold. I would like to offer the estate $1 million for this property. Can you please present it to this hippie out in Hawaii? He doesn't even need to present it to her, actually. He's a decision maker. He could say, yes, because the estate doesn't have any money. We're going to take the $1 million. Right? How quickly could we sell that house for $1.8 million? Before the end of the day, guys. Just going to tell you that. It's in Palm Beach Island. Or maybe Uncle Josh is relocating.
A little bit.
Right?
I think at that price point you kind of have to.
Part of your house.
It's right up against
You
Naples.
quit.
It's on the water on Palm. Look. Guys.
Well, it's one of those two units.
Yeah, well, I'll take one of them. Right? That would sell instantly and be a $700,000-$800,000 deal. Because we're finding the decision maker. That's it.
But I mean, the biggest thing is, what does that tell you? Like on this particular, you have two deals that everyone wants to stay away from doing estate deals. The first deal we looked at, we determined they had no money. They filed indigency paperwork. The second one, the people that are entitled to it, the decision maker lives in Naples, who's a 39-year-old guy who gets nothing from this, and the people are so far removed. To me, those are deals. Right?
Like, most people do not have $50,000 to pay taxes on a property in Florida when they live in Hawaii. Or they live anywhere.
And if the decision maker even had the money, he wouldn't put it up because there's no point for him to do so. There's no advantage for him to do so.
Correct. He gets nothing for it. He's not going to put up 50 grand
Doesn't
to get
matter
nothing.
what happens to it. If they go to auction, he still doesn't care.
Correct.
Theoretically.
Okay.
And like another thing we're going to look at here, guys, is
What was the name of the other guy? Cynthia Curtis and Robert Frank.
the other thing we're going to look at here, guys, is
Well, William's dead. So Robert Frank is just admitted his 50% is going to the estate of William Strana, and Robert's the